the surprising things I felt when I visited an axe murder house. It's been called one of the scariest, most haunted, and creepiest houses in the Midwest. But what is it really like inside the Villisca Ax Murder House? Welcome to Back Then. I'm Tracy Briggs. This week's episode is brought to us by Discover Jamestown. To learn more, go to discoverjamestownd.com. Over the years, if I mentioned to friends that we're going to Iowa to visit my husband's family, I was bound to get a few questions, such as, does your husband's family live near the Field of Dreams? No, but we have been there. What's the deal with those giant pork tenderloin sandwiches and Maid-Rites? I don't know, they're delicious? And this one, most likely asked by a Gopher fan. You know who you are. You know what the initials IOWA stand for, right? I do, but I'm not going to say what it is here. If you want to know the answer, you can Google that for yourself. The fact is, our trips to the Hawkeye State are pretty great and usually involve some of what I just mentioned, eating a lot of good food and visiting a few notable tourist spots. They don't usually involve stopping at an axe murder house, but it's just what we did earlier this summer when we entered, cue the scary music, the Villisca Ax Murder House in Villisca, Iowa, a town of about 1,100 people located about halfway between Omaha and Des Moines in southwest Iowa. The Ax Murder House there has been heralded by some as one of the most haunted places in America. It was my daughter Laura's idea to check it out after she saw something online about what had happened here. The horrific axe murders of 6 members of the Moore family and 2 of their house guests in the early morning hours of June 10th, 1912. As a fan of the true crime genre, I was intrigued, so I thought, okay, sure, why not? We were also joined by my younger daughter, Jordan, and my sister-in-law, Chris, a former 4th grade teacher, known more for her killer Buster Bar dessert than any love of true crime. It wasn't her thing, but she's a sport, so off we went. Now, I won't go into all of the details of what happened in the house that night, beyond the fact that 8 people were killed by an axe murderer while they slept, and that crime from 1912 is still officially unsolved. For those of you who do want more details of the crime and the fact that after 110 years of it being unsolved, we actually might now know who did it. You will find my story on inform.com under the Vault section, and of course the accompanying Vault podcast can be found right where you're listening to this podcast. But for now, in this podcast, I'll just give you a look behind the scenes at what it felt like to actually be there. As we turned off Highway 71 to Villisca, we passed buildings you'd see in a lot of smallish Iowa cities. A Casey's General Store, of course, and a Dollar General. The Ax Murder House is further down the road on 2nd Street, past the United Methodist Church and the middle school. It looks like most of the lovely homes here until you see that sign in the front yard, Villisca Ax Murder House. The 2-story white home was first built in 1868, and it has had a few owners after the infamous murders in 1912. But these days, it's owned by Darwin and Martha Lynn. I spoke to Martha during my visit, and the woman is a character. She told the story of how Darwin came home one day in 1994 and told her he wanted to put a bid in on the old Moore house. Martha told him, absolutely not. She said she was born and raised here, so she grew up with the story of the murders, so she wanted nothing to do with that house. But Darwin thought it would be a good addition to the small museum they were already running in town. Plus, he said he had lowballed the bid, so there was no way they were going to get it. Well, you know where this is going, right? They were the highest bidder. The house where one of the worst crimes in Iowa history happened was now theirs. They made the best of it and refurbished it to look just like it did in 1912. They opened it up to tourists who were curious for a peek inside. And the tourists have been coming by the thousands every year. It costs about $10 for a guided tour, and if your group wants to spend the night here, it'll cost you $428 and $75 for each additional person. Yeah, no thank you. Now, while I certainly don't have it in me to spend the night here, Johnny Hauser, a tour guide, says others certainly do. In fact, they're booked out for more than a year with everyone from paranormal investigators to women's book clubs. He says he's found boxes of wine in the garbage cans the next morning to prove that last one. After telling us about the overnight stays in the house, Johnny, standing in the backyard of the home with the rest of us, got into the tragic tale of what happened all those years ago. We then stepped inside the house and back in time. It was pretty creepy to see the kitchen look just the way it had in June of 1912. Even creepier, the living room looked a lot like the living room in the farmhouse my husband's family lived in for more than 50 years. The dark woodwork around the doors was nearly identical. Johnny told us how most of the victims were killed in bedrooms upstairs, so that's where we went next. The winding, narrow stairs to the upstairs bedrooms creaked with every footstep. We found mirrors covered in sheets and dolls staring back at us from the kids' beds. The sun shone into the windows, but that didn't help the sense of darkness I felt here. It was hard not to feel, kind of a sense of heaviness. The attic where the killer was alleged to have hidden felt just claustrophobic, for lack of a better word. However, some paranormal investigators have said in the past they believed it is actually lighthearted, teasing child spirits that usually want to make contact, even here in the attic. In fact, they report that the balls that have been left on the floor in the attic will roll without anyone touching them. And the ghosts, or the spirits, or whatever you call them, will even roll the ball to certain people on command. We didn't stay in the house very long, maybe 20 minutes. I didn't feel the need to. I had heard the story, and I saw the eerie places where the victims met their end. It just felt kind of sad. I did stay longer than my sister-in-law, who I found checking her phone near the barn out back. We did appreciate our time at the Villisca Ax Murder House. The staff was friendly and welcoming, and the true crime fan in me did find the story pretty compelling. So if you're into this kind of thing, it's probably worth a stop. If you're a paranormal investigator, an overnight stay might even be your cup of tea. But for me, I have now been there and done that, so I think I'll stick to the Field of Dreams and Buster Bar dessert. Thanks for listening to this week's Back Then. I am Tracy Briggs. This week's episode again was brought to us by Discover Jamestown. To learn more, go to discoverjamestownd.com. Forum Communications is proud to be part of The Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org.